Putting new
Well, that's the speaker, but is the microphone.
Do I have one?
We haven't had.
I just turned mine off. So,
All good, Kurt? All right.
okay.
Hello. Ellie, you good too?
Okay.
Room is ready.
All right. Thank you, and welcome to the Wednesday, May 24th meeting of the Planning Commission. Ellie will present the details of a hybrid meeting this evening.
My name is Ellie Mullins, planner, and I will be helping to facilitate the Zoom video portion of the meeting. We will work alongside the chair to facilitate the meeting proceedings. I have a few housekeeping items for this hybrid meeting. This meeting is being recorded and broadcast on the city's YouTube channel and cable channel 25. Please remember to mute yourself during the meeting when you are not speaking. The chat function for this public meeting is disabled. All chats will go directly to me. Unless you are participating during the meeting, please turn your video off. This allows the active meeting participants to be seen on screen. You will still be able to hear the meeting. When you are participating, please turn your video on. If you have any trouble, you can send a chat to me. The city reserves the right to mute people or turn individual videos off to minimize distractions during the meeting. And now I will turn the meeting back over to Chair Ashworth.
Thank you, Ellie. First, we'll go through the communications. Do we have any written communications to receive from the public?
They were all included as part of your packet.
Thank you. Do we have any written communications from staff, planning commissioners, or other commissioners?
None this evening.
Any written action of any waiver request determinations made by the city engineer?
Also none this evening.
Thank you. Is there any disclosure of ex parte communications? None. Declaration of abstentions from specific agenda items by the commissioners. I must abstain from item number 4. So Vice Chair Rexroad will take over that item to avoid appearance of conflict of interest. All right. Nobody else? Okay. Now is the part of the meeting where we accept general public comment for any item that is not on the agenda this evening. Is there anybody here to give general public comment not on the agenda this evening? Seeing none, we will just start with our regular agenda then. We have items 1, 2, and 3 are related, so we're going to hear one report, but we will be taking separate actions on each of those. The planner for the project, it's a consideration of a couple rezonings for, 5651 West 6th Street. This involves items 1, 2, and numbers 1 and 2. Yes, sorry, 1 and 2. If Catherine Week is our planner on this project.
Yes, good evening, Commissioners. Catherine Week. I'm here to present. It's actually 3 applications I'm going to do in one presentation, and then there'll be 3 separate motions. So we have 2 rezonings for 5651 West 6th Street, Z2300118, Z2300119, and preliminary plat associated with those 2 rezonings, which is PP 2300117. Let me see if I can go ahead and share my screen. It's going. And if you can just confirm that you can see that, I'll begin the presentation.
We can see it.
Okay, perfect. As I said, this is for 3 applications for, oops, we've got the wrong one here. We've got item, let me stop sharing, get the other, sorry about that. And now can you see Beth's Ranch on the screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. All right, so we have 3 applications with this one. It is a rezoning and preliminary plat for Beth's Ranch. The rezonings that you'll be seeing this evening is from the current zoning district, which is UR. Part of it will be rezoned to RS5 district. That's 4.5 acres on the southern portion of the project. The other piece is for the RM12D district, and that is on the northern 17 acres of the project. This particular development is proposing to do single-family lots in the RS5 district, and then lots that are available for duplex development on the RM12D. This is the map and general area. This particular piece of property is located on the south side of West 6th Street between George Williams Way and Stone Ridge Drive. Surrounding zoning in the area, we have some RM12 duplex residential, some RS7, which is the predominant zoning that is just to the south of this particular parcel. PRD, which is currently developed, which is a planned residential development currently developed with multi-dwelling residential. There's some CO, RS10, and CC600 to the north, and RM15, which are the CO, CC600, and RM15 are currently vacant. The RS10 is developed with a religious institution. There's also some multifamily zoning to the north as well, to the north and to the east. Concept plan that is submitted with the rezoning is before you on the screen. As you can see, the yellow area to the south of the development is where the RS5 single-family lots are proposed, and then the orange area towards the center and north of the property is where the RM12D or duplex development is being proposed. We have surrounding land uses in the area that range from single-dwelling residential, multi-dwelling residential. There is some purple or pale purple commercial that is currently vacant and a little UR sliver to the north. And then we have some industrial to the south and west in this particular area where the property is located. So just as a reminder, we do have public notice requirements. The notice sign gets posted by the applicant. Newspaper is published by staff. Written notice is also mailed by staff. And we did receive some communication on this particular project, and all that correspondence was included in your packet. So a reminder of the review criteria for rezoning applications. We use the golden factors for rezoning applications, and those include conformance with the comprehensive plan. This particular property is located in Tier 1 of the urban development area, and it is not located in a sector or area plan, but it is adjacent to the west of K10 plan. There are no specific neighborhood plans for this particular particular property resides in. We check for the suitability of the subject property for the uses for which it has been restricted under its current zoning designation. This, as I mentioned, is a UR district, which is a holding district when properties come into the city under annexation, and that district is kind of a placeholder so that properties don't get rezoned to things that are not appropriate at the time they're annexed. And so the property does have to be rezoned for any development on this particular property. The length of time that the subject properties remain vacant as zoned is another criteria or golden factor for review. This property is currently vacant. It was a rural residential property. Those structures associated with that have since been demolished. The other criteria that we look at are the extent to which approving the rezoning will detrimentally affect nearby properties, and if there's any gain if any, to public health, safety, welfare, if the property were to be denied. And staff does outline all of these in the staff report, and I'll be happy to answer some questions and go into them in more detail as we continue our discussion, if necessary. This is an image of the preliminary plat that has also been submitted as part of this particular project proposal. Again, you can see the layout of the property is that the residential lots are to the south of this particular parcel, which is adjacent to the current RS7 or single family or single dwelling residential neighborhood that is there now. The duplex lots are created in the center and to the north along 6th Street and the perimeter of the property. And that does create a transition to the commercial node that is to the northwest and across 6th Street. So the applicant is proposing a mix of two different types of residential dwelling on this particular property. Just to kind of outline the quantity or density that's being proposed of the 4.25 acres on the RS5 district, they're proposing 24 lots for that single dwelling residential development. The lots range in size from 5,510 square feet to 7,213 square feet. Most of them are in the 5,000 range, but that gives you the minimum and maximum that are being proposed. And then the RM12D section, which is the remaining approximately 14 acres, 41 lots are proposed. Those would then be divided roughly in half for duplex development. And those lot sizes range in size from 9,297 square feet to 17,000, or just over 17,300 square feet. So that does provide the lots the capacity to accommodate duplex dwelling structures. So we have a little bit different set of criteria for a preliminary plat review. When we are looking at preliminary plats, we are looking to make sure that it conforms with all of our subdivision regulations. So we're looking at each lot resulting from the division or the creation of the subdivision has direct access to public streets and roads, that each lot resulting from the division conforms to minimum lot sizes and other dimensional requirements for that zoning district designation, that the major subdivision and all the lots within it conform fully to the standards that are set forth in those subdivision regulations in 2810, that the proposed lots conform to the current comprehensive plan and any watershed or sector or neighborhood plans that are adopted in accordance with that comprehensive plan, that the proposed subdivision conforms with any adopted major thoroughfares map, and that it provides logical continuation of any streets or roads that would be affecting land, including in that proposed subdivision. And then that the major subdivision shall provide for logical connection of streets and or accommodate constraints from steep topography, allow connectivity between both street vehicular access and pedestrian connectivity. And the proposed major subdivision conforms to all adopted master plans for watershed and wastewater systems, and that the plat would conform to the Kansas minimum standards for boundary surveys. So in staff's analysis, we did look at all of those criteria, and this particular preliminary plat does conform, in staff's opinion, to all 8 of those criteria. And as Chair Ashworth had mentioned, there are 3 separate applications for this particular development. And those applications require 3 separate motions and votes once we get through discussion on the items. And I've outlined them separately in case we need language at the end for how to word those. Staff is recommending approval of the rezoning request from UR to RS5 and forwarding that request to the City Commission for approval. Staff is also recommending approval of the rezoning request for the 17 acres from UR to RM12D, forwarding that request to the City Commission with a recommendation of approval. And staff is also recommending approval of the preliminary plat. And I would be happy to stand for any questions or elaborate on any of the information that you have in your staff report.
Thank you, Catherine. We have 3 people listed for representing the applicant. All 3 are certainly welcome to speak, but please keep in mind the 10-minute time limit for this presentation. Can I ask who would like to present for the applicant? Yes, sir.
This is
Is it? Are you,
Jason Hoskinson on Zoom.
Jason Hodgkins? Are you? And you are, sir?
I'm Roger Johnson.
Roger
Yes.
Johnson. Okay. So go ahead, Mr. Johnson.
Okay. I'm Roger Johnson. I'm the owner of Beth Ranch. I apologize for my voice and the coughing. The allergies really got me bad today. My comments will be brief, and I'd like to thank you all for your time and consideration of this project. As you know, Beth Ranch consists of townhomes and single-family homes. We had a neighborhood meeting. The feedback was very good. Basically, there was not much negative comments, which was surprising to me. So I'll jump into the details of the stormwater drainage and the walking trails. We think that less than 5% of the traffic will go through the existing neighborhoods due to the easy access to 6th Street. The storm drainage has been addressed in the plan that you have. We also designed walking trails within Best Ranch to tie to the existing walking trails, so it could be a walking community. The trees that remain are designed to be left to help buffer the traffic noise and add some privacy and beauty to the homes. The trees that were removed will be mulched and recycled. I have designed Best Ranch to be used for residential use, not a rental community. I bring this area on now to help with the low inventory of residential properties. The main aim of Best Ranch is to attract young families and retirees. An advantage of this neighborhood was that it was supported by all the neighbors that showed up at that meeting and did agree that this neighborhood will help with the reduction of pack rats, coyotes, and the homeless population that had moved in. Again, thank you for allowing me to keep this brief, and I will answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. And Mr. Hoskinson online?
Yeah, thank you, commissioners. I'll be brief as well. Roger is a client of ours. I'm an engineer with BG Consultants, and David Hamby is also on the line here as well. We'd be happy to try to address any questions that the commission may have of us regarding the plan as it's laid out. I do have to mention I may be jumping off here in just a little bit. My son is graduating at Free State, so that commencement's going to be starting here soon. So I'll stay on as long as I can. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, and congratulations. Did Mr. Hamby want to speak to this project?
David Hamby with BG Consultants. I'll just be available to answer questions after Jason has to roll off if needed. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we'll turn it over to public comment. Is there anybody in the room that wishes to comment on items 1 and 2? Items number 1, the rezonings. No? Is there anybody online that would like to comment on item 1, the rezonings? Nope, no public comment. I'll bring it back to the commission for discussion.
I don't have.
Who would like to? Who would like to get us started? The same.
Questions. I think the project. I love the way that's laid out. I love the RS5 zoning and how that's set up against the existing residential and then expanding towards 6 with multifamily. I don't have any questions. I intend to support.
I have, what's the average size lot for the RS5?
Why? Or 6,000 some square.
Sir, if you could speak, we're going to have to ask you to speak into the microphone
You have to
for
be
those online.
recorded,
Yes,
see.
yeah.
I think most of them are 50 to 60 feet wide, and they're pretty deep. I think it's a minimum of 120. We kind of backed them up, match up with what's there. It doesn't quite, but it's close.
Cool. And are the duplexes you anticipate side by side or
We're
up
going
and
to try
down?
and keep it single story.
Single story?
Yeah, my goal is to attract retirees, and you can't sell 2-story to them because nobody wants to walk stairs.
So you're looking at a little over 100 dwelling units when you, two for each duplex lot and one for each RS5, so
That's correct.
that's pretty good for infill there.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay.
And, what are the big stormwater issues?
Right now, that whole area was, when it was designed, this area that I have was designed with it. So we tie into the existing stormwater that was designed to take that area. So from an engineering standpoint, it's pretty easy.
It's already set up for,
It's already set up. The stormwater, the water, and the sewer is already there.
all right, thanks. That's great.
Thank you. That was my question, the stormwater, so thank you. Other comments?
Well,
Sure.
I have no question regarding this project. All I can say is that I really appreciate something like this coming to the city. Me knowing that the average listing price in the city of Lawrence as of Monday was $330,000, and that's a pretty steep price to pay for a home these days. And the inventory has been less than 100 homes every week in the city of Lawrence, and that is a very, very, very low inventory, and it has been like that for a long time. So all I can say is that I really do intend to support this project.
Okay, not seeing any other comments. Would anybody care to put forward the first motion for the first rezoning? That would be UR to RS5.
Lost my place.
I'd be willing to make a motion.
Commissioner Carter?
I move that we recommend approval of the request to rezone approximately 4.50 acres at 5651 West 6th Street from Urban Reserve District to single-dwelling residential, based on the findings presented in the staff report, and forwarding the request to the City Commission with a recommendation for approval.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
Commissioner Thomas got it first, so, okay. Any further discussion? Okay, and now we do not have to call the roll for the vote. We can just simply say, all those in favor, say aye, or raise your hand.
Aye.
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 All
Do
those,
you count that?
oh,
We used to raise our hands.
Yes.
and say it so you could count.
Hands would be helpful just to
Okay.
confirm, but I know we haven't done it in so many years, I've forgotten how to go
Yeah.
through the practice myself, so.
okay, let's do that again. All those in favor? Aye. All right. All those opposed? Any abstentions? No. Okay, motion carries. Thank you. Rezoning number 2.
I'd be willing to make that motion, unless there's any further discussion. Okay. I move that we recommend approval of the request to rezone approximately 17.07 acres at 5651 West 6th Street from UR Urban Reserve District to RM12D multi-dwelling residential, based on the findings presented in the staff report, and forwarding the request to the City Commission with a recommendation for approval.
Thank you. Do we have a second? Commissioner Kelso, seconds. Any further discussion? All right, we'll take the vote then. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? All right, any abstentions? No? All right, thank you. That does feel weird.
First time
We haven't
in
done that,
3
yes.
years and
Not to the old timer.
Yeah, okay, well, we'll get to the old timer. Okay, so the third vote on this project, who would like to put a motion for the preliminary plat?
Sure, I'll be happy to make that motion. Okay, but if I just point of order, this is to approve, or is this recommend approval?
This would be to approve.
Okay. I move that we approve the preliminary plat for Beth's Ranch based on the findings listed in the body of the staff report.
Thank you. Do we have a second? Commissioner Munch, all right. Any further discussion?
Yeah, I'd just like to make a comment for everyone else to think about what's coming up in the future. RS5 is the one RS district that right now does not permit accessory dwelling units. So that's probably going to be coming up. These are long lots, so keep these types of places in mind when you have that discussion when it comes up in the updated land development code.
Thank you. All right, shall we take a vote? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Any abstentions? All right, thank you very much. That is items 1 and 2. We will now move on to item number 3, to consider a preliminary development plan for villas on Branchwood. Catherine Week is our planner again.
All right, so I think I will have the correct presentation this time. We'll get that going here. All right, can you all see that?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, perfect, thank you. All right, so this is, this may look a little familiar to you. You actually heard this project, it was before you in February. There has been a change. Before it went to Planning Commission, the applicant has changed the number of proposed dwelling unit in the project. So it is back before you again so that you can rehear the item, and what you are seeing is the same thing as what the City Commission is seeing when it goes before the City Commission. So briefly, I will go back through this with you, and we can have any discussion as necessary, and I will cover the change that is proposed since you heard it in February. You'll have to let me know if this is advancing properly, because for some reason on my screen, I don't see the advancement, so.
It is not
Not
advancing.
yet.
Okay, so let me try this again then.
You were not in presentation mode on.
Oh, you're right. Yes, thank you. Let's try that again. There we go.
There you go.
All right, so this again is for Villas on Branchwood. It's located at 5275 West 6th Street, and this is for a preliminary development plan. Surrounding zoning on the property, this current parcel is zoned RM12 with a PD overlay, which is multi-dwelling residential. The surrounding zoning for the property is urban reserve, RM24, which is multi-dwelling residential, RM15 PD, also multi-dwelling residential, RS7, which is primarily to the west, and PRD, which is to the south. So mostly residential, a mix of single-family and multifamily residential. The surrounding land use on the property is predominantly single-dwelling residential. There is some multi-dwelling residential slated for north of 6th Street is currently vacant, and there is some multi-residential to the immediate west, and undeveloped property to the northwest. So again, this is for a planned development. The PD overlay does require planned development, which is why you're seeing planned development for this. Just a synopsis, this is the area, and this is an image showing where the development will be located on the site in relation to the area and neighborhood. As you can see, it's oriented towards 6th Street and Branchwood Drive as an L shape, with the interior of the lot being set aside for the open areas and some surface parking. Primarily, the parking for this particular development is under the building. This is a rendering of the project as it faces 6th Street. This is provided by the applicant, and this will give you a good idea of what the structure will look like. These are elevations, a west elevation and the north elevation, just to kind of show you the consistency of what the project will look like. So for preliminary development plan review criteria, again, we look at the consistency with the comprehensive plan, the consistency with the plan development standards of section 20701 of the Land Development Code, the nature and extent of the common open space. All PD developments are required to have that common open space. The reliability of the proposals for maintenance and conservation of common open space, whether it's adequately or inadequately providing the amount of function for common open space in terms of the densities and dwelling types proposed in the plan, and then whether that preliminary development plan is making adequate provisions for public services. In this case, public services are nearby the property. It's again another infill development, whether or not it's controlling vehicular traffic and any amenities for the recreation and visual enjoyment. Whether that preliminary development plan measurably and adversely impacts development of the neighborhood nearby, and whether potential adverse impacts have been mitigated to the maximum practical extent, and then the sufficiency of the terms and conditions proposed to protect the interests of the public and residents of that planned development in case a plan that proposes development over a period of years, if it's a phased development, for instance. So this again is a multi-dwelling residential project. All of the units are within the building. It is proposing 32 two-bedroom units, 12 one-bedroom units for a total of 44 total units. And that's the change from what you saw in February, where the total was 38 total units. And so the 44 total units gives a net density of 9.8 dwelling units per acre. And this PD designation, it's RM12 with a PD overlay, which is geared towards 12 dwelling units per acre. And the future land use here is slated for medium to high density residential. Medium falls within that 7 to 15 dwelling units per acre category. So this development does fall squarely within that range. So this is just an overview of how that open space is being provided. It is, again, oriented towards the center of the lot. It's required to have at least 20%. They're providing 21%. The shaded green areas show you the two types of open space that they're providing, the common open space in the dark green area and that recreational opportunity green space in that light green area. They also are providing the required landscape and buffering. They are providing street trees in the amount that is required. There's 16 total along the north and west frontages. They are maintaining existing tree lines. Obviously, trees that are not on their property will not be disturbed, but trees that are on their property or overhang on their property they will try to maintain those trees as much as feasibly possible. And then the buffer yard requirements along the east and south, which is a type 1 buffer yard, are also being provided in that yellow shaded area where additional shrubs and some trees are being planted. So they are meeting the landscape and buffering requirements for a planned development. So going over access and parking, they're providing access off of Branchwood Drive on the south portion of the lot in a loop format. So they come into the site and enter out in a loop shape. The small amount of surface parking, 21 spaces that are provided on the surface for short visits. And then the primary number of spaces for the residents and long-term parking, 73 spaces are being provided underneath the building. So one thing to note about preliminary development plans, there is the opportunity to have some flexibility to offer parking modifications. This project is seeking a modification to provide over the amount of parking that is required. With the change in dwelling units from 38 to 44, that did change the parking requirement total to a total required of 80, but they were already providing 94 for this particular project. So there is still an overage that is being provided for this project. So it does require that modification to be considered by the City Commission as well. So again, on this particular project, there are two voting motions. One would be for the preliminary development plan itself with the recommended conditions. And the second is to make a motion and a vote for the modification to approve the excess parking. And so just one item of note, I've outlined the conditions that were presented to you in February. There was some discussion in February about trees, and the applicant did mention that the condition was very specific as far as caliper, and the commission did decide to strike the last portion of that. I've highlighted that in yellow. So if you do choose to do a similar type action on the condition that you approved in February just ended after the 1-by-1 one-to-one basis. So the last part of that was stricken from the landscaping. In any regards, the change that was presented to planning staff did not impact the analysis or the outcome of staff's determination as to whether or not the preliminary development plan met the criteria for review. And staff is still recommending approval of that PDP and forwarding that to the City Commission with a recommendation for approval, subject to the conditions as outlined in the staff report. Staff is also recommending approval of the modification to allow the parking excess over the 80 required to the 94 that they're proposing on that preliminary development plan. And again, I'd be happy to go over any of the criteria or any of the change elements that were noted in the memo that was also included with this one.
Thank you, Catherine. Representing the applicant on my list is Dean Grobe.
Looks like he's joined.
But
Actually, I
Is-
probably am tonight. Sorry.
yeah. So Paul Werner, would you please present
Sorry.
on the?
Paul Werner Architects. Yeah, I think I'm giving Dean a night off for a minute since it's more probably about the architecture than the engineering, although he did the plan. So I feel a little bit bad that this has to come back for you for us just adding a few one bedrooms. The ratio, we're only allowed to add 5%. So when you start out at 38 units, it doesn't change much before you guys get to see it again. So I apologize, but we did want to add some more one bedrooms. After looking at it and a little closer, we had probably a higher ratio of 2 bedrooms to 1 than we would wind up with at the end. So we feel it's a better project, and that's really the big change, as Catherine mentioned. Feel glad she did an awesome job with the report to explain that. We're still well below the density for a PD. Feel like we're a pretty good neighbor. Underground parking. Again, we are heavy a little bit on parking only because we feel that visitors and fast trips in and out, they're not all going to use the underground parking. So we feel good about that. But we'd look for your support and get this. It was unanimous last time. We'd hope for the same thing, and can answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we'll have a public comment on this project. Is there anybody in the room that wishes to speak on this project? There is, and actually, can we pause just for a moment? We'll have Commissioner Rexroad come back. I just wasn't sure there was anybody here for that. So, thank you. Just pause for a moment here. Please.
Good evening, Commissioners. Thank you for your time this evening. My name is Tony Strukoff. My residence is directly to the east of this property, 705 Fox Chase. My property line sits on a cul-de-sac, sits in a wedge, so my entire property line would be the extent of where the building bumps up on the east against, so I have no green space directly behind me as it sets. Right now, I believe the current building setback about 12 feet. With the current layout and everything else and how everything sets, if you've seen the facility, and my property already sits very low compared to this, and that building being that close to my property line is now going to present itself as a 30 or 40 foot building standing directly 10 foot from my back fence, which is my concern. I lose daylight, possibility of clearing out my grass, everything else, all these different things, along with my shrubbery. I'm also concerned with that small of area in there, can I actually even get a privacy shrub to grow? Because we already do have well-established trees going across there. In the privacy on that piece, they have 2 exit doors that would end up being just 10 foot or 12 feet and about 15 feet from my back door on a 44 unit building. I know they're not primary entrances, but my concern is more about privacy through here. I know you guys reduced their landscaping pieces on the last time we heard this, and I apologize I was not here from last time. I don't know if I missed the letter, I didn't see it, so I wasn't able to make comments back in February, so appreciate you guys hearing me out tonight. But I have talked to Paul a little bit about some of our concerns and everything else, but so just not having that buffer there and with where it stands at the height, say we have privacy concerns, damage to our property and different things like that are some major concerns of mine as a family and everything else with it looking right down into our yard. So appreciate your hearing me out. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the room who would like to speak on this project? Yes, please.
Thank you. I'm Michelle Leeson. I live right next door to Tony and Nicole at 709 Fox Chase Court. So my backyard adjoins this property that's being developed, and my concerns are basically the same. 10 feet from our property line is fairly intrusive, and the fact that our yards, mine is on 3 different levels, lower backyard, then kind of mid, and then the upper level, and then with this 2-story apartment building so close to the property line, it's just kind of invasive to be that close. I also wanted to ask that the developer put in a row, preferably a double row of pine trees across the width of their east property line, just to add a little privacy. I think almost all of us that live in this area moved here, or I did, just because of the trees that we have. Our backyards are pretty treed, but part of the look of the really treed look is some of these trees that'll definitely be removed for the development. So if the developer would put in like a double row of pines, that would really kind of add some privacy. I also wondered, is there any plan to put up a fence around this development?
When we come back to the commission, we can bring that up.
Okay. And then I noticed that in the plan it said that it would be aesthetically unique. So I'd like to know what makes that apartment complex aesthetically unique. So that's my primary concerns, is just the privacy. And for the underground parking, when people come and go, how do they exit? Do they exit onto Branchwood or 6th, or do you know?
We can discuss those once public comment is done. Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else in the room who would like to give public comment? Is there anybody online who would like to give public comment about this project? Okay, seeing no more public comment, would the applicant care to respond to the issues brought by public comment? Mr. Warner?
Yeah, I'm getting there. Sorry,
Okay, sorry.
2 computers. So I will ask to give Catherine a heads up. I think maybe her second slide will help us here in a minute. But so when we started this, what I really tried to do was to stay with 2 stories versus 3. We're well below the density. This would be awful easy to make a 3-story building, and you saw all the green space, especially since we go down below. I probably have had people ask me why it's not even denser. But 3 stories probably is, I will use maybe the word a little more intrusive. I certainly don't think this is. So what that forces is to make the footprint a little bit bigger to get the units, or I can make the footprint smaller and we go a little higher. So that's the reason for the design. It's pushed all the way to Branchwood. We're pushed all the way to the setback on 6th Street. That's pretty good. I do feel, I've talked to Mr. Struckoff twice. He has been the nicest neighbor by far surrounding this property. That's why I'm going to ask Catherine to put up the site plan. Her slide, I think, is a good example of where this building is in relation to his backyard. So I offered earlier tonight that to not have any windows on our second floor facing his property. I think that's, if they're worried about privacy, in my mind, not having a patio or a deck or something like that on the backside of your house, I can understand that. But as I tried to explain earlier, so all these units face north and south. So on the far right side of Catherine's slide, excellent slide, Catherine, thank you. Fair, we are, 12 feet off. It is our exit stair. So I hate to say that doorway should almost never be used. It is a stairway, so there's no windows in it. And Mr. Struckoff's house is, fairly far away on the east side. And sorry, I don't know her name that just spoke. She is correct, man. On the back side of your houses are well treed and, provides a good buffer. I struggle with, it's awful easy to make things harder. We meet the setbacks, we meet the buffer yards. We have the building as far away from the neighbors as I can get it. The access point is determined by the monster building to the west of us. So I feel this is pretty good. The comment about a fence, maybe the neighbors to the south, they didn't comment. A 6-foot fence, we, especially the planning commissioners that have been there a while, fences are a bad deal. They don't last, they don't get maintained. We are much more into landscaping and berms and doing what we can, but a 6-foot fence across the east property line doesn't really do anything for anybody. We think the site's laid out correct. If a condition that says no windows on that east side towards Mr. Struckoff's house on the second floor helps, we're willing to do that. But I would think that's a much better plan than just making the setback bigger for some arbitrary reason. So those are my comments. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Warner. I'll bring it back to the commission now for discussion. Commissioner Munch.
I have a question to start for staff. What would be in this particular zone here, what would be the tallest that the building could be? And then what is the current height proposed for this particular development?
Okay, so the maximum height for the structure is 35 feet. I'll apologize that I do not have the proposed height on hand. Paul may have that handy. It should be under that 35 feet, though.
Yeah, it's 2-story building, 10-foot plates, which are pretty nice. So, how the city measures it, we're talking 22, 23, 24 feet, but we could be much higher than that easily if we really wanted to.
Thanks.
Other comments?
So this, were you going to talk, Jim?
Well, I just had a question for Paul about the pros and cons of a line of evergreen trees in your experience.
We've had a bad few years with certain species. What's the deciduous tree that we just found out that are dying all over the place and being replaced? That we were, we don't always pick the trees. Whoever's in charge of landscaping at the city 20 years ago picked one that we all thought was a good tree, the Bradford pear, and now we find out it's not. Again, looking at the site plan and way it lays out, I'm not quite sure. that's fair to my guys to just put a double row of evergreens along the, it's a 300-foot long east side. I think we plant trees and shrubs and a berm where we need it, and we go from there.
Yeah, I'm just asking because, in my observation, when one evergreen goes and they're all the same species, they all go pretty much at the same time.
Sorry, and you're exactly right. And when they're all planted at the same time, which is what happened in my yard, and all of a sudden they grow into each other, and I realized that I should have spread them out and planted them at different times, because all of a sudden you need to thin them out, and the trees are the same size. So I don't think that's the right answer for a buffer.
Catherine, could you tell us how wide is that buffer on the east side?
I believe that's a 10-foot buffer that's required. It's a type 1 that's required for that.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I guess we should reference the entrance exit. The only entrance and exit is onto Branchwood Drive.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't even think you're allowed to exit onto 6th Street out there.
Yeah, I believe that's correct. There are some plat restrictions in place for the along 6th Street because of I think it was KDOT controlled at that point in time, so I think they can only access to the side streets and not directly to 6th.
Right.
And it does look like correct me if I'm wrong, the exit for the parking garage is to the south.
Yeah,
Right
so
before this
actually,
is.
actually the exit coming in and out of the garage exits onto the property itself, and then that cars will exit the property to Branchwood Drive at the south portion of the site.
Correct, thank you.
So they shouldn't see any incoming headlights or anything like that. They'll be going straight out and then to Branchwood.
What about headlights coming out of the underground parking? Is there something that will block those from going across the property to residences?
Those residents, they've just rebuilt, back to my point about a fence, they have just rebuilt their own fence along that property line, the entire length. That's how we're getting in at the lowest grade as we can. So right when we exit Branchwood, you enter the garage. So that's the lowest part of the structure.
Mm-hmm.
So again, that should be 90% of the traffic right there in and out. So should be minimal. And again, that's the location where it's at. And there's obviously, as already mentioned, there's no access to 6th Street at all.
Right.
Does anybody care to comment on one of the conditions that was suggested about windows? Yes,
I have a question on that. So to the extent that there are concessions made by the developer with respect to placement of windows or use of particular doors, is that something that's even within our purview, or would that just be negotiated between the two property owners? Are we able to say that there should only be, first floor windows on the east frontage?
Catherine?
Chair Ashworth, do you mind if I answer that a little bit?
Please, go ahead.
There is specific requirements in 2701 about PD developments, and they are prohibited from having balconies that overlook residential areas. So they already are conforming to the PD requirements and not having any balconies overlooking those adjacent neighborhoods. There is not a provision prohibiting emergency access doors or fire escape doors. So they are within the parameters of the PD. Obviously, you can modify conditions if you so choose, but just to let you know that they are within the parameters of that PD as far as what windows can and cannot be there, or what things can and cannot be adjacent to that neighborhood.
Okay, and so to confirm our power to modify the conditions, that would include that we could put strings on where particular windows are placed, or is it just with respect to the overall footprint or like the appearance of the building more generally that we're able to control?
I'm not sure, but Jeff might be able to Jeff or Randy might be able to answer that a little more clearly, but I do believe that conditions are within your purview.
Commissioner, I hope let me rephrase the question, make sure I've got the right angle here. Is the question, do you have the ability to recommend a modification to the architecture of the building based upon the comment?
Yes.
You can make recommendations to the city commission that they could take up as a modification to the plan, but as Catherine stated, there are very limited items that are in the PD that where you would have some stipulations to it, such as balconies and those kind of things there. So you could make a recommendation that it be included as part of a condition to it, but again, you are the recommending body up to the city commission.
Got it.
Are you asking, how do we memorialize or document the offer Paul's made to remove windows on the east side?
Well, yes, to some extent, if that's even within our power. And if it's the case that the private parties are able to come to an understanding on this and on a handshake or otherwise and have confidence, that's great, that solves the problem. But if this was, we wanted to have something backing it such that it just wasn't talk here in the presentation, I'm curious as to what our options are in this particular situation.
Well, it does sound like that would be a recommendation to the city commission. The city commission would have the ability to make that more solid, I guess, would be the...
But the door and stairwell's going to stay because that's fire code.
That's right. There are certain safety features that have to be, whatever the egress must be for safety purposes. But we can, so that would be up to the commissioners if they wanted to make that recommendation to the city commission.
Let me say my heart goes out to you three and how you have handled this, according to Mr. Werner, that you have tried to be very positive about it. You've made recommendations that you think would help. I do not know of any changes that could be made that would ameliorate your situation. But I know you've talked with Mr. Werner several times. You've made suggestions. He has come back to you tonight. I hear him say he would not put windows on the east side there on the second floor. I do, my heart goes out to you for where you are in this situation.
We do need to keep in mind the factors on which we make these decisions for preliminary plats. Does anybody have any comments with regard to those? No.
Actually, if I may, Chair, I may have to read that. I don't believe you can actually make recommendations on windows as I read through the code, because there are very specific things that the city commission can modify. Those include allowed uses, the densities, balconies, and those things. And I'm not seeing anything in here real quickly that would say that it would have a restriction on windows or in that level there. So my apologies on my first statement being a little incorrect.
Thank you for that clarification. If one of the commissioners would like to ask a question of the public.
I would ask, what do you think, but you have to come up to the microphone. What do you think of what you have heard expressed tonight?
Well, first off, I know Paul's done a very good job, and I believe this layout of the facility has done the maximum to keep it away from the most people as possible. As I kind of mentioned, it comes right up against ours, which inherently sucks for us, but is best for the overall good. So I understand that piece of it. I don't know if there's anything, if we can't move it back, and like I said, 20 feet to 12 feet, that's probably not going to change. I appreciate Paul's commitment to not putting the windows up there for our privacy. I don't understand the landscaping and the privacy piece through there. I don't know if there are any other commitments that can be made through there that, besides him just, I don't know, trees, berms, just on the initiatory plot plan. If you look at it, part of the garage is probably going to stick out of the ground if you see the contour of our yard as well. So it's going to be even higher. So I don't know if there's berms, walls being planned through there. Like I said, it's very specific to our property as you go through there. So I say if there's some sort of privacy wall, a commitment to some sort of shrubbery besides we're just going to replace what's there, or I looked through there, there's 9. It could be as small as a burning bush or as big as a 10-foot bush based on the landscaping plan. So it doesn't really give me, not that I don't believe Paul would do anything like that, but it doesn't give me much confidence that there's not something in writing that requires a higher level of privacy with the building being that close to my. So if we can't move it, like I said, that would be the other ask, is the landscaping and the privacy piece, if that can be increased, and maybe it's already at the highest level. I don't know the codes on that, but that would be something across there on that side of it. So, thank you.
Thank you. I am afraid we were rather limited in terms of our review criteria for recommending approval or denial of this, because the project meets all the parameters laid out. So we're pretty limited in what we can do about that. So
I'd just like to point out, this isn't the first proposal for this plot. And this one, in my mind, is better than what's come before. I'm getting a head nod there that yes, because I believe you were probably at least one of those prior meetings. Or somebody, there were many more neighbors at when there was a different configuration of separate buildings on this lot that never came to fruition. So this appears to meet a lot of the concerns that have been raised over time. The fact that it's going to be limited to the 2 stories, even though the regulations would permit a 3rd story on this. They're limiting the size and putting parking underground. I think there's been a lot of modifications to try to take into account the adjacent property owners, and I do appreciate that. There's always that problem, as Paul pointed out, with planting trees all at the same time. You see them all die at the same time. It's a big problem because the people that put up the buildings put in the initial landscaping, and then nobody is really required to do much after that, and things fall apart like fences. And I just know, like the whole city or the east side of town's losing some old oak trees all at the same time that all came out of the same nursery that used to be in South Park. That went in about 80 years ago, so they're all coming down at once. And evergreens are so susceptible to blight anymore, you can't count on them at all. So I think it does meet all the criteria that we're supposed to be looking at, and I can't see how we would vote against it.
I tend to agree with you, Commissioner Carpenter. I think that as this is developed, even up until just today, this continues to improve. I'm really happy to hear that Paul's working with the neighbors, and I can just encourage you to continue that great relationship with what sounds like might be a new neighbor. And honestly, I think this is a pretty darn good project for where I thought it was the last time around a few months ago. I think it's even better today, and I intend to support it.
would anybody care to make a motion? There are 2. Remember, there are 2.
I can get started if you'd like.
Motions.
Move approval of preliminary development plan PDP 22-00439 for villas on Branchwood located at 5275 West 6th Street, forwarding to the City Commission with a recommendation for approval based on the findings presented in the staff report and subject to the conditions listed in the report.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
Commissioner Munch? Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. Thank you. And there's one more item with this project. That's the excessive parking. I don't believe we have the language written for that. Do we have the
I wrote
language?
a little bit down here. It wasn't,
You wanna-
it wasn't presented in that, but I wrote down off of Mary's
Okay,
slide.
go right ahead then.
Catherine's slide. We recommend modification to allow parking in excess of Article 9 in the Land Development Code associated with this project, and forward that modification with a recommendation for approval to city.
Thank you. Do we have a second? Commissioner Thomas, thank you. So all those in favor, second, any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, motion carries. Thank you. And thank you
Thanks for
for
being
your
here.
attendance.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
All right, we're moving on to item number 4. I have to hand this project over to Vice Chair Rexroad.
All right, item number 4 is before us. Consider approving a special use permit for an institutional development plan for the Douglas County Fairgrounds Master Plan. And Sandy Day, I believe, is here to
In
present on it.
person.
Oh, hi.
Good evening.
I just immediately went there.
Sandy Day, planning. I decided for this last item tonight, I'd see you in person. The proposed item that you have before you, if you want to look at your packets, pages 14 and 15 show you the site plan for this project. It is an institutional development plan, and as such, we process those as a special use permit. This is a modification to the Douglas County Fairgrounds to add a maintenance building at the south end. This is the only change that's being made to the overall improvements to the site. We had a fairly lengthy discussion both with the applicant and at the staff level about gravel. The previous institutional plan was approved in 2015 and did allow for gravel under the code at that time. This project continues the use of gravel to access this building. It is not part of the publicly accessible buildings. It is a staff maintenance building, and then it connects into the existing gravel drives that provide access to the various buildings at that site. So this project ends up replacing the previous project, so appropriate notes have been updated on the drawing. The item will go to the City Commission for their action, so your consideration this evening, again, on that development plan, institutional development plan, is as an advisory role. There were no conditions with this project, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
And we have applicants. Are they here to, or online to present as well? Sandy, do you know?
I did not look at the...
Mr. Maurer or Mr. Cunningham? Land plan and CT. There you go.
There are county staff.
I am Jimmy Wilkins. I'm the Director of Building Maintenance for the county. So if you have questions, I'm more than happy to answer those
Right,
questions.
no comments for you?
I don't believe so.
All right, thank you. And anyone from the public here to speak on this tonight in the room?
I'm Corby Rust with Land Plan, and I too can probably stammer through a few questions if there are any.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. And public comment, is there anyone here in the room for public? I don't see anybody else. Anybody online that is here to speak to this item? Seeing none. Any last words back to the commission?
Well, before we do anything, I think you should all know at least the names of the county people that are here, because you should know who's doing this work as a planning commissioner.
Hello, Commissioners. My name is Jay Zimmershed, Director of Capital Projects for Douglas County, Kansas. I think the importance of this building really is it's pretty simple. I mean, the project is very rural, strangely within the city limits, but really it's about providing safe work conditions for our staff who are doing the maintenance components out there. Currently, they're working in buildings, I think, from the 50s maybe, that were never really intended to do some of the maintenance tasks that have developed over time for them to produce. And so that's really why we're eager to get this and kind of get this underway, so that we're improving those conditions. So again, happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
I just have one quick comment, and I'm going to sound picky about this one. The diagram that's listed under site summary, as much as I'd love for it to be called the 4-H Fairgrounds, it's the county fairgrounds, not the 4-H Fairgrounds. Even though I love both of the organizations, and I'd love for 4-H to own it, but they don't. That's all.
Thanks for calling that out. Any other comments on the SUP that's in front of us tonight? Any questions?
No, this is a strange thing when county properties within the city limits.
Isn't that
has
odd?
to go through this process, but you'll see the same thing for the jail, if there's anything up there, and some other pieces of property the county has. But
Any questions or concerns about the review criteria that we're asked to look at on this particular application? Anyone care to make a motion? Got to start there.
Okay. I move we approve special use permit SUP-23-00123 for an institutional development plan for the Douglas County Fairgrounds Master Plan in the GPI, General Public and Institutional Use District located at 2110 Harper Street and 1910 Harper Street, based on the findings presented in the staff report, and forwarding the same to the City Commission with a recommendation for approval.
Thank you. Second? Mr. Kelso. Any other comment? No discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Same sign? None showing? And that matter is behind us. Thank you all for being here. Appreciate you sticking with for tonight. If we could call Chair Ashworth back, we have a little bit more business before we adjourn.
You got my last motion.
You can hold out until you did that.
Okay, thank you all. We do have one more item of business. That concludes our regular agenda. And our last item of general business is, before we adjourn, I need to announce that there's a likely quorum of the Planning Commission that will be gathering at the Black Stag after tonight's meeting to acknowledge and celebrate Jim Carpenter's service as a planning commissioner. So after 2 terms on the Planning Commission, tonight is Commissioner Carpenter's last meeting.
2.5 terms.
2.5 terms, okay. I want to thank Jim Carpenter for his long-standing volunteer service to the city and the county. We're going to miss Jim's ability, for his incredible ability to recall past decisions and minute details of the development code. It's been an impressive feat of yours, and it always is extremely helpful for us. That recall comes with wisdom, and it also comes with sort of a lawyerly tone from time to time, which is always fun. And it's always meant to inform the decision at hand, and it's much appreciated. I want to say that as chair, I've learned to wait and watch for that sort of subtle half finger raise that you do. That's going to signal a comment, and that comment is going to reference a past decision, a detail of the code, or a nuanced interpretation for a matter before the commission. Jim's service to the community started years before his tenure on the Planning Commission, and I suspect it will continue long after this meeting, and we just want to give our great appreciation for your service.
Thank you.
Thank you. You have a very nice certificate.
All right, thanks.
Anybody else want to throw some thoughts and
Commissioner
words?
Carpenter, I don't think that I've been to a meeting in the going on 2 years now that I've served with you where I haven't learned something from you. You have shaped not only how I think about this and given me some foundation for the work that I'd like to do, but I think you've shaped in many ways the way the commission thinks and operates today, and that's a legacy that'll go forward. And you've shaped policy and the city and the way we've built and grown. It's a pretty amazing legacy. Proud to have worked with you. I hope it's not the end. I hope that we continue on with LDC and other things. So thank you.
Thank you.
I feel like I just have to acknowledge Jim's contribution not only to the city, but to my own growth in this body. Jim's a tough act to follow, whether it's through a comment or through a position as chair. I have really looked up to Jim as a mentor, as someone who is always measured and thoughtful in his observations. He knows when to speak up and when to stay quiet, when to wait and listen for somebody else to contribute to a conversation before sometimes bringing it all to a close with a very circumspect position. And as Chair Ashworth said, a very deep history of the issue at hand. And so I don't know anybody who has been as engaged in civic life as Jim has been, and I find it both incredibly inspiring and incredibly daunting. And I just have to say, I look forward to whoever dares to fill your seat, because, like I said, you're going to be a tough act to follow.
Thanks. Well, you're all filling my seat. So
And if I may, just on behalf of staff, we'd like to just say thank you for all your service, and it's been an honor and a privilege to work alongside you these many years, not just here, but also on the Board of Zoning Appeals and in your numerous other boards that you've served on. So on behalf of all of us, thank you.
Well, thank you. I mean, I'm so glad Sandy was here, because I wish Mary was here, because they're the first two planning staff members I ever engaged with, and that must have been back in 1998 when we had a neighborhood issue, and that's how I first got started on this. In
98.
And I've always followed it and always enjoyed it, and I'm serious. You should watch meetings. Watch what's happening with the city and county, because it all helps inform it. And listen to each other, because I have learned from every single one of you and every single person that's been on the commissions in the 7.5 years I've been here. And, David, it was, I think you're the only one that had to do an entire term on Zoom, since we went to that when I was chair, and that was a tough transition. And you never got to. And we still, finally, we have Commissioner Bunch here.
For you.
Which is great. We finally all got off Zoom for the first time. So it's been an honor to be here and work with staff, and Randy, learned a lot from him, and Jeff, some of our discussions I know we've raised eyebrows of others as we go into the weeds sometimes, but that's been part of the most enjoyable part of this. And I hope that it's informed other people about some of the intricacies. There's always another way. The code has flexibilities built into it that allow other avenues. So don't give up, and don't make decisions just for one person unless you feel that it's going to be appropriate for anybody else that comes in. Because I think that's one of the keys, to think as far out into the future as you can, and to think as widely about what the implications are about what you do. And I think that's what makes good planning commissioners, and I'm very happy I'm seeing that in everybody that's on the commission right now. So it's your job to train the new people that come in. So thank you.
Thank you. Well, I guess there's one more thing. We do have to vote to adjourn this evening. Any further discussion before we take a vote to adjourn? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed?
Abstain.
Any abstentions? Hard to let go. All right, thank you all. And thanks again, Jim.
Thanks.
Abstain, that was beautiful.
Yes.
Jim can always come for public comment.
We didn't get to go to.
Sorry?
He can always come for public comment.